In this video, we'll visit one of Dickinson's most loved poems, and we'll do it from a few different angles. There are at least two almost diametrically opposed ways to read it. And first, before we even do read it, we will take a look at the manuscript. There is only one manuscript of this poem extant, and this is it, beginning here. Above it is the final verse of another poem continued from a previous sheet. I want to make another video showing how that she worked in this way, so look for that ahead. And yes, reading Dickinson's handwriting is an acquired skill. And if you've noticed that cross by the word letter, we'll attend to that in that future video that I mentioned also. Note the marks, usually called dashes, throughout. Here's how the poem appears in print. The one thing that's a little different in the case of this particular poem is the transformation of all those irregular marks into nice, regular dashes. I have something to tell about the dashes, but first, here's how the poem is usually read aloud. Especially note the pause between the stanzas. This is my letter to the world that never wrote to me, the simple news that nature told with tender majesty. Her message is committed to hands I cannot see. For love of her, sweet countrymen, judge tenderly of me. Now, about those dashes. Them there dashes have been the subject of much study, including this book by Dickinson scholar Paul Crumbley. As you just heard the poem read, again, as it is most often heard, the simple news that nature told is conveyed in the speaker's letter to the world. It's like she's sharing this simple news from nature with the world through her writing. Heeding the dashes, however, yields a very different reading. This is my letter to the world that never wrote to me the simple news that nature told. With tender majesty, her message is committed to hands I cannot see. For love of her, sweet countrymen, judge tenderly of me. Crumbley writes, suddenly the speaker seems to be saying not that she is communicating news transmitted to her by nature, but that nature is part of a, quote, world that never wrote to her. Read with an eye to the dashes, the poem suggests the possibility that the speaker never received, quote, the simple news that nature told, and that the message was sent to others whose hands I cannot see. You must remember that Dickinson lived in mid-19th century America. She and those around her used words in ways not always familiar to us. For example, to them, the word car could mean only railway car. And because they were so very familiar with the Bible, the word news would have suggested the Gospels, which means good news or good telling. But why would she apply this word in this particular context? Emily Dickinson read Ralph Waldo Emerson. He was one of the most influential thinkers of the 19th century. Something from his essay, Nature, suggests a possibility. He wrote that the noblest ministry of nature is to stand as an apparition of God. The school of thought that Emerson inspired, transcendentalism, encouraged followers to seek the divine directly in and through nature. And in this quote here, he describes nature relative to man as a ministry. There's the news that nature told. But why simple news? If you've read much of Emily Dickinson at all, you know that she was a keen observer of nature. At times, she expressed the opinion that no artist could capture its essence. For example, one poem begins, "How the old mountains drip with sunset, how the hemlocks burn," and it continues on to describe the transformations worked as the sun declines. It ends with, "These are the visions flitted, Guido. Titian never told. Domenichino dropped his pencil, paralyzed with gold." But the visual artist did try, maintaining that the successful landscape would present more than woods and heath and lakes and waterfalls. It would convey what they called atmosphere or essence. One who wrote perhaps most persuasively along these lines was Durand. When you stand before a landscape painting and feel somehow moved within yourself, Durand would have said that it was the painting's essence that was acting on you, or that the artist had successfully captured the atmosphere of the scene. But atmosphere is not something that you can point to and say, "Aha, there it is." Atmosphere has no form as natural objects do. It is essence. Just so, the transcendentalists would have found the divine in nature felt but invisible. Durand wrote, "If abused and adulterated by the poisons of conventionalism, the result will be the corruption of veneration for and faith in the simple truths of nature, which constitute the true religion of art." Using language and meanings prevalent and familiar during her lifetime, Dickinson tells of the simple news that nature told. To her contemporaries, the word news would perhaps have conveyed more powerfully the felt influence of nature even than the word truth. Here, as throughout her work, we find Dickinson employing the powerful vocabulary of her Christian heritage to give force to her writing, to her letter to the world. One of the causes of the difficulty modern readers of Dickinson have, and it's only one, is just the way words and common vocabulary have changed over time, as I hope this video has at least hinted. More fully to develop this idea, I've written this book, Emily Dickinson as a Second Language, Demystifying the Poetry. If what you've seen and heard here is promising, check it out.